So if you ask someone, why they don't believe in God, they usually point to a lack of evidence.
Right. It's always about the data.
Exactly.
Mhm.
They'll say they looked at the data, weighed the arguments, and just, well, found the evidence for the divine lacking. But, I mean, what if unbelief has nothing to do with evidence at all?
That's the big question.
Yeah, what if what looks like this neutral, objective lack of belief is actually an active, aggressive rebellion posing as neutrality? Welcome to today's deep dive. We are opening up a massive stack of notes, summaries, and deeply pastoral reflections based on a seminal work by Ravi Zacharias, The Real Face of Atheism. It was originally titled A Shattered Visage.
And, our mission today is incredibly specific.
Yeah, we aren't here just to list out a bunch of arguments against atheism.
No, not at all. That would really be doing a disservice to the depth of the material we're looking at. If we just treat this as an apologetics manual to win debates, we just completely miss the point.
Totally. We are looking at these sources through a very intentional lens. We want to know how does contrasting the Christian worldview with atheism actually inspire a believer to love Christ more deeply?
Hmm.
Like, how does understanding the absolute despair of a universe without God push someone to live out their faith more fully in their daily life, Monday through Sunday?
And we really have a fascinating blend of materials to get through today.
We do. We're going to be looking at philosophical critiques, examining major cultural thinkers like Nietzsche and Sartre,
Oh, the heavy hitters.
right? And
Yeah.
diving into deep biblical frameworks like Romans 1 and Psalm 14. And we'll constantly be pulling this back to the practical realities of your daily life.
And it is crucial to establish the ground rules right now.
Yes, please.
Our goal is not to be combative or dismissive of the atheist experience. We're going to explore these perspectives as they are presented in the text, treating this material as a profound philosophical and spiritual mirror.
A mirror for your own life, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Asking you to examine the unseen foundation upon which you are building your reality. The sources present a conservative evangelical perspective, and, well, we are going to dive into the mechanics of that worldview to understand exactly how it operates.
Okay, let's unpack this. The sources hit the ground running with a concept that fundamentally challenges how our modern culture operates. They call it the myth of neutrality and the battle of worldviews.
Myth of neutrality.
Yeah. The core argument here is that atheism is not just a denial of God. It isn't like a blank space on a canvas where a painting of God used to be.
Right.
It is an active, comprehensive commitment to a completely different kind of painting. The sources highlight thinkers like Friedrich Nietzsche, Jean-Paul Sartre, Albert Camus, Bertrand Russell.
And they argue that these men don't just represent isolated pockets of personal doubt.
No, they symbolize a massive tectonic cultural shift, a shift away from transcendence and toward total human autonomy.
To understand the gravity of this,
Mm.
we really have to define what the sources mean by a worldview.
Which is such a buzzword, right?
It is. But a worldview isn't just your opinion on a few hot-button political issues. It is the comprehensive framework through which you interpret every single piece of data you encounter.
It's the lens.
Right. It answers the fundamental questions like, where do we come from? What is wrong with the world? How do we fix it? And where are we going?
And the text argues that atheism answers all of those questions decisively.
Exactly. Therefore, it is not a neutral position. It is a deeply committed faith in the natural world as the ultimate reality.
Let me put an analogy to this because I hear people claim this kind of neutrality all the time. It's like someone claiming they don't have an accent.
Oh, yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Right. You'll be talking to someone and they'll say, well, I don't have an accent. I just speak normally. You're the one with the accent.
Right, right.
But from a linguistic standpoint, everyone has an accent when they speak. It just depends on where you are standing. Just like everyone has a worldview, everyone has an interpretive grid. Atheism is an accent. It is a very specific, historically conditioned way of pronouncing the universe.
That analogy gets right to the heart of the mechanism. When a culture loses God, when it adopts this secular accent, as Zacharias points out through these cultural philosophers, it doesn't just enter a state of pure, objective rationality.
No, it develops substitute authorities.
Precisely. It elevates human autonomy. The idea that the self is the ultimate lawgiver, the ultimate arbiter of truth, is elevated to the highest possible position.
And the conservative Christian perspective presented in our sources frames this exact shift using very specific biblical texts, right?
Yeah, most notably Romans 1:1e through 32 and Psalms 14 and 53.
Let's dig into that biblical framework because it directly challenges the modern narrative.
It really does.
The modern narrative says, well, I use my reason, I look at science, and I realize God isn't real. But the sources argue that from a biblical perspective, unbelief is not framed as a simple lack of evidence.
No, it's not a cognitive error.
It's deeper than that.
Way deeper. It is framed as a moral and spiritual suppression. The language in Romans 1 is incredibly active. It talks about people who suppress the truth by their wickedness.
Suppress the truth.
Yes, the argument here is that the reality of a creator is evident in the created order, in the complexity of the universe, in the fine-tuning of physics, in the moral law written on the human heart.
But because acknowledging that creator would require submitting to his authority, human beings actively push that truth down.
It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It takes constant, exhausting effort to maintain the illusion of absolute autonomy.
Well, wait, I need to push back on this on behalf of a skeptic listening.
Sure, go for it.
Because a modern atheist would say, look, I am not actively suppressing anything. I'm not secretly angry at a God I know exists. I genuinely, sincerely do not see any evidence for the divine.
Right, they feel it's just an honest conclusion.
Yeah. So how does the source material address the lived psychological experience of the atheist who feels completely sincere in their unbelief?
The sources address this by looking at the subconscious nature of the human will.
Okay, how so?
Well, the argument isn't necessarily that every atheist is consciously sitting in a room, twirling their mustache, and scheming about how to ignore God.
Right.
The suppression is often deeper than conscious thought. It's a fundamental orientation of the heart.
Yeah.
The text posits that human beings have a deep-seated desire to be the masters of their own destiny.
We want to be the captains of our own souls.
Exactly. If God exists, then we are accountable to him. If we are accountable to him, we are not absolutely free to define our own reality. Therefore, the will essentially bribes the intellect.
The will bribes the intellect.
Yeah. The desire for autonomy tells the intellect, go find me a philosophy where I don't have to answer to anyone. And the intellect comes back with naturalism.
Wow. The will bribes the intellect. That is a terrifying thought.
It really makes you evaluate your own motives.
Because if that is true, it means our supposedly objective reasoning is completely compromised by what we secretly want to be true. And this leads right into the daily application for the believer.
Absolutely.
Because if you realize that everyone, including yourself, is operating from a committed worldview, and that our hearts are prone to desiring autonomy, it forces an intense self-examination.
It demands what the sources call worldview awareness. They challenge you directly. Are you, as a believer, subtly adopting the secular assumptions of the culture around you?
That's a hard question.
It is. When you think about your identity, do you derive it from your career success, which is a highly secular metric, or from your status as a child of God?
Or when you think about truth, right? Do you treat it as something you discover through revelation or something you curate based on your feelings?
Exactly. In the conservative evangelical view, faith is not merely intellectual assent. It isn't just signing off on a doctrinal statement. Faith is allegiance.
It's loyalty to a king. And
Yeah.
that completely changes how you live your Tuesday afternoon. Daily life becomes an arena.
You are consciously submitting every thought to Christ. The notes reference 2 Corinthians 10.5, taking every thought captive.
You aren't just coasting.
No. When you watch a movie, when you read a news article, when you sit in a corporate boardroom, you are aware of the underlying grid. You are asking, is the premise of this conversation grounded in the reality of God? Or is it grounded in human self-rule?
And that tension between divine reality and human self-rule is exactly what those 20th century existentialist philosophers were agonizing over.
Like Nietzsche.
Yes. When Nietzsche famously proclaimed the death of God, he wasn't throwing a party.
He wasn't celebrating.
No, he was issuing a horrifying warning. He understood that you cannot unchain the earth from its sun and expect everything to stay warm and bright.
Wow, that's a powerful image.
He knew that if you remove the transcendent foundation of Western thought, you don't get liberation. You get the terrifying burden of having to create your own light in a pitch-black universe. So if we establish that we are just operating in the dark, trying to invent our own light, the immediate crisis becomes, well, what happens to the core of human existence?
The sense of purpose.
Right. What happens to our sense of purpose? If the divine foundation is gone and we are just matter in motion, how do we justify getting out of bed in the morning? This moves us directly into exploring the anchor of meaning in a world of accidents.
This is where the philosophical rubber meets the existential road. Zacharias claims in the text, when you deny God, you deny the basis for meaning.
That's a bold claim.
Let's look at the mechanics of why the sources argue this. Atheism, in its modern form, is generally constrained by the philosophy of naturalism.
Right, the idea that the physical material universe is all that exists.
Exactly. There's no spirit, no soul, no transcendent realm, no divine mind behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Therefore, human life, consciousness, our ability to love, our ability to reason, all of it is merely the product of unguided, random biological mutations over immense stretches of time.
We are cosmic accidents.
We are.
But let's steelman the secular perspective here, because I think it's vital to feel the weight of their argument before we look at the critique.
Okay, let's do it.
An atheist, a secular humanist, would strongly object to the idea that their life has no meaning. They would point to their deep love for their family. They would point to the art they create, the diseases they help cure, the communities they build.
Sure.
They would say, look, I don't need a God in the sky to tell me that holding my newborn child is meaningful. I experience that meaning firsthand.
And they do.
Right. So how does the text reconcile the profound lived experience of the secular humanists with the claim that they have no basis for meaning?
Well, the sources make a highly critical distinction here between subjective experience and objective reality.
Okay, unpack that.
The book is not claiming that atheists are incapable of experiencing love, joy, or deep attachment. Of course they experience those things. They're human. What the text argues is that the naturalistic framework cannot philosophically justify the ultimate significance of those feelings.
I'm struggling with that. Explain the mechanism. Why can't it justify it?
Because if the universe is ultimately just atoms and void, interacting according to blind physical laws, then meaning cannot logically arise from meaninglessness.
Wait, meaning can't arise from meaninglessness?
Right. Let's break it down. A chemical reaction, like mixing baking soda and vinegar, does not have moral or existential meaning. It just happens.
It's just fizz.
Exactly. If human consciousness is solely the result of chemical reactions in the brain, which naturalism demands, then the feeling of love you have for your child is nothing more than a neurochemical illusion.
Ouch. An illusion.
It is a biological trick programmed into you by evolution to ensure the survival of your genetic material.
So the meaning isn't real in any transcendent sense. It's just a useful fiction for survival.
Precisely. In that worldview, purpose dissolves into subjective preference. You might decide your purpose is to cure cancer, and someone else might decide their purpose is to amass immense wealth by exploiting others.
And neither is objectively right or wrong.
In a purely naturalistic universe, neither of those purposes is objectively better or more true than the other. They're just different biological machines following different chemical imperatives.
The universe does not care.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
When the sun eventually expands and engulfs the earth, all the art, all the love, all the suffering, and all the cruelty will be incinerated, leaving absolutely no memory and no ultimate consequence. That is what it means to lack a basis for meaning.
Okay, the sheer bleakness of that is staggering.
It's heavy.
It's like we are all trapped in a play where the script is blank, the director is dead, and the theater is currently on fire. But we are desperately trying to convince ourselves that our improvised lines are somehow eternally significant.
Yes.
We are just making it up to cope with the void.
And that is exactly what Sartre meant by existence precedes essence. He argued that because there is no creator, there is no human essence or blueprint designed for us before we existed.
We're just thrown into the world.
We simply pop into existence, and then we are burdened with the agonizing task of inventing our own essence, our own meaning from scratch.
Contrast this deeply with the Christian view presented in the text, the imago Dei, the image of God.
Right, because in the Christian worldview, essence absolutely precedes existence.
We were thought of before we were formed.
The sources reference Colossians 1:16-17, which states that all things were created through Christ and for Christ, and in him all things hold together.
So meaning is baked in.
In this framework, meaning is not something you have to frantically invent before you die. Meaning is objective. It is baked into the very fabric of reality by a creator who endowed you with intrinsic worth simply because you bear his image.
There's a profoundly moving illustration in our notes regarding pastoral and hospice care that grounds this philosophical difference in absolute, gritty reality.
It's a tough one, but so important.
It is. When you are 25, healthy, building a career, and surrounded by friends, it is incredibly easy to be a secular humanist. It's easy to invent your own meaning when you have power and agency. But what happens when the body breaks down?
Right.
What happens when you are 85, your memory is fading, your bodily autonomy is gone, and you can no longer contribute to society's economic machine?
That is the ultimate crucible for any worldview. Can it withstand the stripping away of human capability?
Yeah.
If your meaning is entirely tied to your autonomy and your utility, which is often the case in a secular framework, then losing those things means losing your worth.
That is heartbreaking.
But the sources point out that for a believer, meaning is received, not manufactured. In the darkness of a hospice room, when a person can do nothing but lie in a bed and breathe, their life retains absolute, unshakable dignity because it is anchored in God's redemptive narrative.
Their worth is not tied to their productivity.
No, it is tied to their status as an image bearer of the divine.
Which completely transforms how we view suffering. The atheistic worldview struggles immensely to provide solace in the face of suffering, because if life is just a random collision of particles, then suffering is just a pointless, cruel accident.
There is no redemption in it.
You just suffer and then you die. But in the Christian framework, suffering is viewed through the lens of Christ's death and resurrection.
The text emphasizes that God himself entered into human suffering. He didn't just shout advice from a safe distance. He stepped into the brokenness.
He became flesh.
Yeah. That doesn't make the pain magically disappear, but it completely alters the context of the pain. It means suffering is not the final word, and it is never wasted in God's economy.
So let's bring this right down to the listener's daily reality. We live in a culture that constantly preaches self-defined purpose. The mantras are everywhere. You do you, create your own truth, find your own path.
You hear it every day.
But the challenge from these devotional reflections is to fiercely resist that cultural drift. It challenges you to root your daily schedule, your Monday morning commute, your interactions with your difficult boss, the time you spend putting your kids to bed in God's intentional design.
It fundamentally changes the value of your actions.
Yeah.
If you believe the naturalistic view, your small acts of kindness are just fleeting emotional exchanges.
Just neurochemicals.
Exactly. But if you hold to the Christian worldview, you know that every single moment of patience, every hidden act of integrity, have infinite eternal worth. It reverberates in the spiritual realm.
Wow.
You are free from the exhausting treadmill of having to prove your worth to the universe because you are living with the dignity of someone who is already fully known and eternally loved by the Creator.
But if we establish that we aren't just biological accidents inventing our own meaning, the next crisis we run into is how we interact with each other.
Ah, yes. Morality.
If my invented meaning clashes with your invented meaning, who gets to decide who is right? If there is no overarching script, what happens to the rules of the play? This plunges us directly into the crisis of morality and the character of God.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The sources bring up a terrifying concept, often summarized from the writings of Fyodor Dostoevsky. If there is no God, everything is permissible.
Which is a heavy quote.
It is, and we need to be incredibly careful here because this is often misunderstood. The argument is not that atheists cannot be good people.
Right. It's not saying that without a belief in God, people immediately become sociopaths who want to commit crimes.
No, atheists can be, and often are, incredibly moral, compassionate, and self-sacrificing individuals.
Right. So what is the argument?
The argument is about the foundation of that morality. The sources argue that morality without God collapses into either cultural consensus or personal preference.
Because there's no anchor.
Exactly. If there is no divine lawgiver, no transcendent standard of good that exists outside of human opinion, then moral values are just socially constructed. They are human inventions developed over time to help our species survive.
Let's use an analogy to really dig into the mechanics of this. It's like sitting down with a group of friends to play a massive high-stakes game of Monopoly.
Oh, I love this analogy.
Right. Half the players at the table believe the rules were written by the game's creator and are included in the box. The other half believe the rule book is completely blank, and the players just have to negotiate the rules as they go to keep the game fun.
Chaos waiting to happen.
Exactly. At first, everyone agrees not to steal from the bank because it ruins the vibe. But eventually someone gets desperate and starts pocketing $500 bills. The people who believe in the blank rule book can say, hey, we agreed not to do that.
But the thief doesn't care.
Right. The thief can just say, well, I changed my mind. My personal rule is that I survive by any means necessary. Without a rule book from the creator of the game, you don't even have a shared vocabulary to explain why the thief is objectively wrong.
That is a brilliant way to frame it, because it highlights the fragility of secular ethics.
Yeah.
Our modern culture operates heavily on the harm principle, the idea that you can do whatever you want as long as you don't harm anyone else.
But the text challenges this.
It does. Who defines what harm is? And more importantly, why shouldn't I harm you if it benefits my survival?
If ethics are just a voting poll of current cultural tastes, then morality is incredibly unstable.
It's terrifyingly unstable. If society decides tomorrow, through democratic consensus, that a specific minority group is a burden on the state and should be eliminated, on what basis can the secular humanist object?
They can say, my personal preference deeply disagrees with that.
Or they can say, our previous consensus was better.
But they cannot say that is objectively, transcendently evil, because in a universe of blind matter, there is no such thing as transcendent evil.
And this raises a profound irony that Zacharias heavily emphasizes in the text. Skeptics frequently point to the problem of evil and injustice to argue against the existence of God.
Oh, this happens all the time.
They look at wars, famine, and cruelty, and they say, a good, all-powerful God could not possibly allow this to happen, therefore God does not exist.
Which is a very emotionally compelling argument. It's an argument that keeps people up at night.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
But the philosophical counterargument presented in the sources is devastating. Zacharias points out that you cannot raise the objection of evil unless you first concede the existence of an objective standard of good.
You can't have a shadow without a light.
Exactly. You cannot judge a line as being crooked unless you have a concept of a perfectly straight line. If we are merely highly evolved animals in a Darwinian struggle for survival, then the strong dominating and devouring the weak isn't evil. It's just biology acting exactly as biology is supposed to act.
Wait, I really want the listener to grasp the weight of this. You literally cannot be outraged by the brokenness of the world unless you implicitly believe the world was supposed to be whole. And that deep, burning intuition that things are not the way they are supposed to be requires a design. It requires a standard of goodness that exists outside the system.
It does.
The atheist has to borrow the Christian concept of objective morality just to formulate their argument against God.
They are sitting in God's lap to slap him in the face.
Wow.
And the Christian inspiration drawn from this realization is that moral clarity is a profound gift of divine revelation. The sources reference Leviticus 19.2, be holy, because I, the Lord your God, am holy.
Yeah.
And there are similar echoes in 1 Peter 1.16.
Right.
In the biblical framework, morality is not an arbitrary list of rules designed to ruin our fun.
Yeah.
Morality is anchored in the unchanging eternal character of a holy God.
But the sources also throw up a massive caution sign for the believer here. Having access to this objective moral standard should never lead to arrogance or self-righteousness.
Precisely the opposite. The text insists that because this standard is a revealed gift, it must produce deep humility. You don't possess moral clarity because you are intellectually superior or inherently better than your secular neighbor.
You have it because God graciously revealed it.
Furthermore, having the objective standard means you are acutely aware of how far short you fall from it.
This challenges how you and I operate in our daily lives. Think about the ethical decisions you face. Maybe you are asked to cut a corner on a financial report at work, or you are navigating a deeply complex political issue, or you are deciding how to treat someone who has profoundly wronged you.
Real everyday stuff.
Yeah. The challenge is to ask yourself, are you making this decision based on what is culturally acceptable or what is personally advantageous? Or are you standing on the bedrock of biblical ethics?
And the true test of this is practicing moral clarity with grace. When you have to make a costly ethical decision, a decision that might cost you a promotion or a relationship, you aren't just being a rigid stickler for the rules.
You are acting as a witness to a morally ordered universe.
You are physically demonstrating that you believe there is a standard higher than your own survival or comfort. But doing so with grace means you recognize your own deep need for mercy, and you extend that same mercy to others, even as you hold fast to the truth.
But holding fast to truth requires that we can actually know truth. It requires that our minds are capable of grasping reality.
And this is where the cultural narrative really tries to back the Christian into a corner.
It really does. The narrative says that faith requires checking your brain at the door. It says Christianity asks you to blindly follow moral rules without thinking. But the sources explicitly tackle this supposed conflict between faith and the human intellect.
This brings us to an absolutely critical examination of the mind, the machine, and the gift of reason. The sources address one of the most pervasive, deeply entrenched cultural myths of our time. The idea that science and faith are fundamentally at war.
The pop culture narrative.
Right. The popular narrative is that you have to choose between cold, hard logic and warm, fuzzy belief in God. But the book heavily critiques naturalism on this very point, stating something that sounds entirely counterintuitive Atheism is a system that eventually has to deny the very reason it claims to protect.
I need you to walk me through the mechanism of that claim because an atheist scientist would immediately object.
Of course they would.
They would say, what are you talking about? My entire worldview is based on reason, the scientific method, and empirical data. How does atheism deny reason? Let's steelman their perspective here.
Okay.
An evolutionary biologist would argue that our brains evolved to comprehend truth because understanding reality helps us survive. If early humans didn't accurately perceive that a cliff was dangerous, they fell off and died. Therefore, evolution selects for rational, truth-seeking minds. Why does the source material reject that logic?
Because the evolutionary mechanism selects for survival advantage, not necessarily for objective truth.
That is a massive philosophical distinction.
It is. Let's look closely at the naturalistic premise. If the universe is solely matter and energy, then human beings are merely complex chemical accidents. Our brains are the product of random, unguided, purposeless mutations over millions of years.
Just biology doing its thing.
Right. Every thought you have, every logical deduction you make is ultimately just the physical fizzing of chemicals in your neural pathways.
Okay, I'm with you so far.
So if your thoughts are merely the inevitable result of deterministic chemical reactions, how can you trust the rationality of your own mind?
Because it's just physics.
Exactly. A chemical reaction cannot be true or false. It just acts according to the laws of physics. If your brain is just a meat computer programmed by random mutations whose only goal was to help your ancestors pass on their genes, you have no philosophical grounds for trusting that your cognitive faculties can grasp ultimate transcendent truths about the universe. A false belief, like the belief that a rustling bush is always a tiger, even when it's just the wind, might actually provide a survival advantage by keeping you hypervigilant. Survival does not require truth. It only requires pragmatic behavior.
It's like using a highly advanced, multi-million-dollar supercomputer to write a brilliant, perfectly coded paper proving that computers don't actually exist.
Huh. Yeah.
And that all technology is just random piles of metal that fell together in a junkyard by sheer chance. The very tool you are using to make the argument, the complex, orderly, rational supercomputer, proves that the argument is absurd.
It's self-defeating.
If the atheist uses their brilliant rational mind to argue that the universe is irrational and purposeless, they are sawing off the very branch they are sitting on.
That is the fatal flaw of naturalistic epistemology. It undercuts its own foundation. If we connect this back to the biblical worldview, the Christian framework offers a completely different, infinitely more stable foundation for reason. The sources point to the concept of the logos, the word, introduced in the opening of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the word, the logos. In Greek philosophy, the logos was the organizing principle of the universe, the divine reason that gave order to chaos.
And John takes that concept
And reveals that the logos is a person, Christ.
So true reason is a gift from the Creator.
Exactly. The reason we can do science, the reason mathematics inexplicably maps onto the physical universe, the reason we can trust our cognitive faculties to discover truth is because a rational, orderly God created a rational, orderly universe, and he made human beings in his image, giving us minds designed to comprehend it.
Science is only possible because we expect the universe to behave according to laws.
Which implies a lawgiver.
This obliterates the idea that faith is blind. The sources are so incredibly clear on this. Faith is not a leap in the dark when you run out of facts. Faith is a commitment to follow the light of reason all the way to its divine source.
And the application for the believer's daily life here is phenomenally empowering. It changes how you view your intellect. You are not a ghost trapped in a biological machine. You are not just a highly evolved primate. You possess a mind crafted by God.
That means your intellect is a sacred tool.
It is. When you are studying for a difficult exam, when you are solving complex logistical problems at your job, when you are analyzing data, you are exercising faculties granted by the Creator.
This challenges how you and I read our Bibles, too. It means when you sit down with Scripture, you aren't just looking for a quick emotional pick-me-up or an inspirational quote for your day.
No, you are commanded to love God with all your mind.
The sources encourage you to study theology, plunge into the deep end of doctrine, wrestle with the hard philosophical questions. Don't be afraid that analyzing your faith will destroy it. If it is the truth, it can withstand the scrutiny of the mind God gave you.
But as vital as the intellect is, the test also recognizes that we aren't just floating brains analyzing data.
We're not robots.
We are more than logic processing units. Logic alone, while essential, doesn't capture the entirety of the human experience. It doesn't fully explain the profound, often painful emotional realities we navigate.
Yeah.
Specifically, logic alone cannot satisfy that deep, aching void, that sense of existential homesickness that every human being feels at some point in their life.
And that profound human reality brings us to another major exploration in our sources, the restless heart and the desperate ache for transcendence. Zacharias writes in the text, the human longing for transcendence cannot be silenced.
We try to silence it, though.
We do. Atheism attempts to explain it away. A materialist might say, well, that longing you feel is just an evolutionary misfire. It's a psychological byproduct of our brains becoming too complex. But despite our best efforts to suppress it with technology, entertainment, and pleasure, the ache inevitably resurfaces.
You see it everywhere in human culture. You see it in our art, in our poetry, in our obsession with epic narratives of good and evil.
Movies.
Yes. You see it in our frantic search for the perfect romantic relationship, placing the weight of our salvation on another human being. We are desperately searching for something beyond the material world. We are wired for the eternal, but we are trapped in the temporal.
There's a quote in the notes that absolutely stopped me in my tracks when I first read it. It says, "The loneliest moment in life is when you have just experienced that which you thought would deliver the ultimate and it has let you down."
That is just...
Wow.
Think about how devastatingly true that is.
It is the tragedy of the successful secularist.
Right. You spend 10 years grinding to get the massive promotion. You finally buy the dream house. You marry the person you thought would complete you. You hit the milestone you told yourself would finally make you happy.
And you arrive.
And for a second, there's a thrill. But then, almost immediately, the dopamine fades, the quietness sets in, and there is this haunting whisper of, is this it? Is this all there is to my existence? And the sources link this universal human experience directly to the famous Confession of St. Augustine, who tried to find satisfaction in philosophy, in status, and in hedonism before finally breaking down.
What did he write?
He wrote, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it rests in you." The text also points to the profound wisdom of Ecclesiastes 3:11, which says that God has implanted eternity into the human heart.
We have an eternal appetite.
But atheism only offers us a finite menu. It gives you atoms, void, natural forces, and 70 or 80 years of consciousness. But it offers absolutely no spirit to fill the spiritual void.
We spend our lives chasing mirages in the desert.
Thinking the next oasis will satisfy our thirst, but they always fall short because we were literally made to breathe the air of another world.
So, how does understanding this deep existential ache conspire the believer in their daily life? The sources offer a really beautiful, deeply practical application here regarding how we interact with skeptics and people who are hostile to faith.
It's so needed today.
It says, when you encounter someone who is aggressively pushing back against Christianity, don't be threatened by their intellectual swagger. Don't get defensive, and don't feel the need to immediately win an argument. Instead, practice what they call intellectual hospitality.
I love that phrase, intellectual hospitality.
It's great, right?
It means adopting a posture of deep empathy. It means listening carefully to the questions beneath their questions. When someone is aggressively arguing that God cannot exist because the world is too messed up, or religion is too hypocritical, recognize that beneath those intellectual objections often lies a profound, unhealed spiritual wound.
It could be anything.
It might be unresolved grief over a lost loved one. It might be a deep sense of betrayal by a church leader. It might simply be that terrifying ache for transcendence that the secular world has completely failed to satisfy.
You realize they're spiritually thirsty, and you have access to the living water. You don't yell at a person dying of thirst for being grumpy. You offer them a drink.
Such a good perspective.
The challenge is to respond not with defensive anger, not with the desire to prove how smart you are, but with overwhelming compassion.
Exactly. You recognize that their hunger, their restlessness, their anger at the brokenness of the world is actually proof of their divine design. Their frustration that the world isn't perfect is evidence that they were made for Eden.
Right.
From a Joan Hand perspective, referring again to the theology of the Gospel of John, this longing finds its ultimate, exclusive fulfillment in Christ, who embodies both life and light, which serves as the perfect pivot for our exploration.
Yes, let's pivot there.
Because if atheism fails to answer life's four non-negotiable questions, origin, meaning morality and destiny, how exactly does Christianity answer them?
That is the million-dollar question.
Hmm.
Because according to the text, the Christian answer isn't just a formula. It isn't just a better philosophical paradigm or a tighter set of rules or a more logically consistent worldview.
No, it's so much more.
This brings us to the most crucial paradigm-shifting realization in this entire deep dive. We are moving beyond argument to the answer, the person of Jesus Christ.
The culminating foundational quote from Ravi Zacharias' work here is this: Jesus Christ is not merely the answer to a question, he is the answer to the questioner.
I really need to sit with that for a second. Let's unpack the mechanics of that statement. How is being the answer to the questioner fundamentally different from just having the right answers to the questions?
It changes the entire nature of what the Christian faith actually is. If humanity's core problem was simply a lack of correct information, if we just didn't understand how the universe worked, or if we just needed a better ethical instruction manual, then God could have just dropped a glowing textbook from the sky.
Right, he could have just sent a list of divine equations.
Exactly. But information doesn't fix the core issue.
No, because the sources explain through Johannine theology, specifically John 1.4 and John 14.6, that the issue isn't just intellectual doubt. The core issue is the fractured, rebellious condition of the human heart. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Notice, he doesn't say, I will show you the truth or I will teach you the truth. He says, I am the truth.
He is the physical, historical embodiment of ultimate reality. The problem humans face is alienation from our Creator. An argument cannot heal a broken relationship. Only a person can do that.
That's profound.
Therefore, the solution to our origin, our meaning, our morality, and our destiny had to be a person. Christ addresses the whole human being: mind, soul, will, and spirit.
This is so intensely inspiring for how a believer lives out their faith. The sources say this reality calls us beyond apologetics as mere argument, to apologetics as proclamation and presence.
Presence is key.
If you are a Christian listening to this, I want you to hear this clearly. Your ultimate confidence does not have to rest in your ability to memorize philosophical arguments or win a debate against a brilliant atheist.
What a relief.
You don't have to have a PhD in philosophy to be a faithful witness, because you aren't just defending a sterile set of propositions, you are introducing people to a person who is entirely capable of defending himself.
Your role is faithful witness. His role is transformation. That takes an immense, crushing amount of pressure off the believer.
It really does.
You live your life as a living testimony. You show, through your actions, your grace, your patience, and your hope, how the gospel remains central to your identity. You demonstrate that Christ is not just an accessory to your life, a nice hobby you participate in on Sunday mornings. He is your life.
And the hope this provides isn't just some vague wishful thinking. It's not a fairy tale we tell ourselves to feel better about dying. The text fiercely roots this hope in the historical, physical reality of the empty tomb.
The resurrection changes everything.
For the secular world, as the devotional reflections point out with stark honesty, the end of the story is always a cold grave. No matter how much meaning you invent, the grave swallows it all. But for the believer, because of the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ, death has been fundamentally declawed.
Death loses its sting.
You aren't just getting through life. You aren't just enduring the daily grind until your biological machine expires. You are walking every single day toward a glorious, secure inheritance. Every struggle, every moment of suffering, every hidden act of obedience has a purpose. And your future is entirely guaranteed by the one who conquered the grave.
If we look at the comprehensive summary of the material provided in our sources, it brings all these complex philosophical and theological threads together beautifully.
It really does.
The real face of atheism argues that atheism is not neutral. It carries devastating philosophical and existential consequences. Denying God logically undermines the foundations for objective meaning, transcendent morality, the trustworthiness of rationality, and intrinsic human dignity.
But the goal isn't just to tear down the atheist worldview.
No. It is to show that the Christian worldview offers a unified, intellectually robust, and deeply satisfying account of reality. It is grounded in the personal, self-revealing God of Scripture, and it culminates not in a cold philosophy, but in the living person of Jesus Christ.
Okay, let's take a deep breath and logically trace the incredible journey we've just been on through these sources. We started by asking how analyzing a worldview you reject actually shapes how you live.
Right.
We saw that atheism isn't just a lack of belief. It's an active, committed worldview built on human autonomy, which challenges believers to constantly examine their own hearts for creeping secularism.
We then explored the profound crisis of meaning. We saw how a naturalistic universe reduces human life to a biological accident, making all meaning subjective and ultimately temporary.
While the Christian worldview receives objective meaning from the Creator.
Yes, imparting infinite, unshakable worth to every human being, giving dignity even in the darkest moments of suffering.
We looked at the terrifying consequences of morality without God, realizing that without a transcendent standard, ethics collapse into mere preference and cultural consensus.
Making it philosophically impossible to condemn true evil.
We tackled the pervasive myth that faith and reason are opposed. We discovered that a purely naturalistic, evolutionary framework actually undercuts the trustworthiness of our own minds, while the Christian logos provides the only stable foundation for rationality and science.
And we felt the ache of the restless heart, recognizing that our relentless human longing for something more is proof that we were made for eternity.
Calling us to treat skeptics not as enemies to be defeated, but as thirsty travelers needing the living water. And finally, we saw that Christianity doesn't just offer an argument, it offers the answer, Jesus Christ, who heals the human heart and guarantees our eternal destiny.
Which leaves us with the profound, challenging application from the source text for your daily life. The sources challenge believers to aggressively reject the subtle temptation of self-worship.
It's so easy to slip into.
It is. They ask us to practice the spiritual discipline of submission by constantly checking what they term the altar of autonomy.
The altar of autonomy, that is a heavy image.
It is meant to be. The reality is, we all worship something. We all surrender our lives to some ultimate value, and we all sacrifice at some altar. The provocative question for you to mull over today, as you go back to your work, your family, and your daily routine, is this. In the quiet moments of your life, when the noise fades and no one else is watching, are you unknowingly sacrificing your peace, your purpose, and your joy at the exhausting altar of your own autonomy?
Or are you consciously submitting your freedom to the God who actually guarantees it?
That's the choice.
That is a question that completely changes how you wake up tomorrow morning. Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into the profound reflections on the real face of atheism. We encourage you to keep examining the foundations of your worldview, keep asking those massive, non-negotiable questions about reality, and above all, keep seeking the truth.